All right, good afternoon and welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. You have the minutes were sent out and ahead and you have them before you. I'll give you just another minute to review one last time and then I would take a motion to approve them. All right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Hey, this is Joe. I move to accept the minutes as presented.
All right, do I have a second?
A second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we'll now turn it over to Fran to give us a director's report.
Good afternoon, everybody. So really, I just wanted to kind of go over some of the really good and encouraging outreach efforts that both Chris and I have had in the last few months since we last met. Just some of the highlights have been, we've had a couple of meetings with the directors of the adult and preschool programs at Civitan, the services out in Saline County, and have really been encouraged by those conversations. Additionally, thanks to Joe, we have had 2 meetings now with the executive director of the Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities, and are continuing to kind of help each other out if we hear about something that we think would be beneficial for him and vice versa. So it's really nice to be in a position to be building those relationships. In February, which was just last month, we presented to an organization called Child Care Aware. And they're a national nonprofit organization, but it was obviously the Arkansas chapter, and there are resource centers for families and child care providers. And we were connected with them through a previous connection with the organization run by the University of Arkansas that is called Partners for Inclusive Communities. So they had asked us to join them in presenting a continuing education program to about 15 to 17 of their program people, this Child Care Aware Network. So we did an hour Zoom on the ABLE plan with them, and it was very well received. 2 more things. Also through that connection with Partners for Inclusive Communities, we were invited to submit a request for presentation at the annual Head Start regional meeting, which will be held in Jonesboro, Arkansas in September. And the states that make this up are Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. So our thinking is if we do get accepted to talk about the ABLE plan, we would obviously focus on the Arkansas plan, but we would be able to have available information about those other corresponding states' ABLE plans. And then finally, another good meeting we had was with Project AWIN, which is an acronym for Arkansas Work Incentives, and it's a group devoted to helping and encouraging independent lifestyles for those with disabilities. And we're presenting to their 6-member leadership team on April 11th. And that was a relationship that goes back to 2018. This is a woman who was involved when we launched the ABLE plan here. And she went back to an old email exchange with Stacy and found us, and we've reconnected. So it's just been really encouraging, all these ripples and what I think they're leading to. So that's my highlight today. Any questions?
All right, thank you. All right, we will turn it over to Dave Ponder and the team at Ascensus to give us their report.
Sharing the screen. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
And by the way, Fran, thanks for all the feedback on this presentation. And Molly, thanks for putting this together. So this looks a little different than what we saw, what we talked about this morning, where we had a decline in the market driving everything. Here, it looks like we've got about a 3.8% increase in assets this year. Molly, are you seeing anything different?
Now that I'm also seeing that as well.
How's this compared to like other plans? And by the way, Fran, jump in and just let us know what really you want to focus on, and we can amend as we go. So Molly, are you seeing this with, is it this kind of asset growth with other plans across the?
Yeah, we absolutely are. We're seeing a lot of it, being driven by just some natural account growth. And that's obviously happening here with Arkansas as well. And even as Fran, as you were going through kind of the outreach that you were having, we're obviously seeing more people enrolling in the program, and that's leading to more people contributing. I think it's like a 77% increase so far since last year, this time last year.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, because in the presentation we did for 529, there was a drastic decrease in assets from the beginning of the year to the end of February. And here it looks like, obviously you've got an increase of almost 4% from the start of the year. So some of that is going to be, around the next slide, which talks about allocations. But it is obviously they're not as aggressively invested as what we see with 529. So speaking of that, you can look at the investments by option, and the moderate and checking are leading the way here. Obviously, there's no risk to the checking option, and moderate is doesn't have the risk of the 529 product either. So that, I suppose that's in large part why we're not seeing the decrease that we see in the 529 side. Do you agree with that, Molly?
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
And then contributions by month, it looks like that we are currently outpacing, particularly for February. February is a very strong month, but February is leading to the gains in the increased contributions from last year. I don't know if this is something we see across the entire complex or whether this is specific to Arkansas. And it'd be kind of interesting to see if we could dive down to understand what is driving the such a dramatic change in contributions for the month of February. Especially with all the market news that's out there. I don't know. Again, this is much more of a conservative approach in investing, but still people are very aware of what's going on in the market.
Absolutely.
And then on the contribution type, the only thing my thought when I saw this chart, the first thing that stands out, and again, my mind is wrapped around the 529 product in some ways, is the recurring contributions. Is there a way to step up the amount of recurring contributions, because they kind of give an insulation to down periods that we're in right now. People set it and forget it, and it continues to, the assets continue to flow in. Molly, do you have a sense of how 7% compares to some of the other plans? Is that about in range? Is it?
That's about a trending range across the alliance. I would say something that's a real big positive is if you also combine that with the EBT contributions, it's about 40% of all contributions for the plan are coming in through electronic means, which means, a lot of participants within Arkansas Able are choosing to do a lot of their transacting online versus other methods. So that's certainly certainly good.
Yeah, and we even have some payroll contribution occurring there, so that's contributing somewhat. And then we look at contributions by age group. Again, I'm not, as we move forward, I'll have a better background on whether or not this really sticks out. Contributions by age group. I'm assuming this is there's various sources of these contributions, but it is interesting to see that the folks who are participating who are younger are getting the majority of the contributions.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. This is a brand new slide for this presentation. And as we've been building this for across a lot of the Alliance members, this is widely different for everybody, and it just really talks a lot about demographics of your specific plan. And really, I think it'll be something that we can keep an eye on as, you know, we progress and really check what some of those trends end up becoming.
Yeah, I mean, Fran, and I think this is kind of where we could use your feedback. Is there anything that we can add to this slide to give you more depth on I mean, it's one thing to present data, but it's another to kind of present knowledge. And we can certainly, you know, if there's something else we can add here to give you more knowledge about it, let us know.
I mean, Grant, is there any interest in seeing where this compared to like previous years, like last year at this time?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I appreciate that y'all are just now tracking this, or I guess just now reporting this. But it would be nice to see, you know, year to year kind of comparisons, understanding that this is, whether it's like a monthly snapshot or something like that, you know, as y'all kind of develop that out, would be fine. I don't want to make it too complex that there's too much data on here, but would like to see how trends develop.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if, you know, Molly, you and I could talk, and Johnny, about adding a trend line. Maybe that's something that can give a little more depth to the insight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So distributions by month, you know, a little bit like what we saw in contributions. Distributions were significantly higher in 2022 than it was the same time period last year. So again, not sure what's driving that, and every plan probably has a you know, a variable to what you're seeing here, but it, you know, again, if there's insights that you want behind this, Fran, let us know, and we can certainly add that.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say, Dave, I'm so sorry to jump in. One thing I'd like to say is that's a pretty standard trend across the alliance of what we're seeing. And as we saw where the Arkansas Able assets are currently, you know, what was it, 30 to 40% of assets are actually within the checking option. That's one thing to also consider whenever we see the distribution data, is the checking option is very much a transactional type account. And we are finding that a lot of participants are using it in that manner. So when we see this distributions by month, a large chunk of what you're seeing there is people taking distributions from that checking option. And as you go to the next slide, you'll actually see that trend continue.
Withdrawal at bank.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that, you know, because you think in some ways these lines would be somewhat flat because people's living costs, you know, are fairly the same, you know, month to month. But I guess it depends upon what they're using the account for, to, you know, what they're paying for.
Yeah, holiday trends as well. If people, you know,
Exactly.
Major holidays, we tend to see a lot more distributions coming out of Able accounts.
Yep. And this is the next line. Obviously, you see the leading withdrawal is from the bank.
Yeah, that says Fifth Third withdrawals.
Yep. Yep.
Yes. Can you give me a little bit more definition behind that, since we don't have any Fifth Third physical branches?
Does it link to them?
So are we talking like ATMs, or is this their check writing?
It's a mixture of all of that, really.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we do have a little bit of high level data about what some of those transactions look like.
Yeah.
And we can always provide that to you. Yeah.
Yeah, we can probably look into that, Grant, and see. The assumption is that people are using their debit card, but you certainly can see writing checks at a bank to get money. But I mean, I know when we first launched the product, there were a lot of debit transactions with Arkansas in those early months. I haven't looked into details since then. We can certainly look at it and let you know. But the assumption is, I'm making the assumption that it's debit card transactions.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So distributions by age, I guess people who are 56 to 60 don't ever make distributions, but everybody else does. Not sure what that means.
I
Molly?
will say that it'll be interesting as, you know, as we kind of introduce like the hierarchy and, you know, kind of simplifying the process for newer account owners being able to enroll. And then hopefully, given that age adjustment ever finally passes, you know, it'll be really interesting to see how contributions and age grouping changes, because I think that's going to do a lot. That's going to have a significant impact to the programs.
Very good. And then new accounts by month. It looks like we actually, it says right here that 31 versus 31, but if you do the math up here, it looks like we had one more new account during the January, February timeframe than we did last year. So that's on the increase. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting how the transition from month to month. January was real good for 2021, while February was really good for the current year. Any questions on this?
I think as we look to the future, it'll be interesting to see, as you're having those outreach presentations, to see if we actually see any sort of kind of increases in new account growth at those times.
Yeah, that'd be a good measurement of success of the outreach.
Absolutely.
And then accounts by disability type. Is there any, and my first thought when I saw this is that, you know, I'm not, what can we add to this to kind of give you a little more information on this?
I mean, yeah, I think it gives us a good snapshot, Dave. I don't think we need more detail there.
Very good. And then by custodial type, any background you want to provide here, Molly?
I'm so sorry. I have a barking dog. Can you repeat that?
I was just asking if you had some background that you could provide to the slide. Any thoughts?
Not necessarily. I think this is something that we've really been showing for a while here, just talking through eligibility, and then what the custodian breakdowns are for your participants.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the enclosures, again, you know, it looks like 2022 in February was a big month for closures. I'm not sure what's behind that, but it's an interesting piece of insight.
Yeah, we do see some trends there across the Alliance, really, because if you see a larger increase in enrollments kind of 30 and 60 days ahead of time, what'll happen is if it takes some time for us to get, you know, paperwork or that initial funding in, I should say legal paperwork or that initial funding in, that you know, that account could technically be closed. But once we actually receive any of that paperwork, that account then gets reopened. That's a general trend that we find. Hopefully it's something that the new implementation of the regs will solve for, as we start kind of moving to not really asking for as much legal documentation for account setup. So hopefully in the future, we will actually see this decreasing.
So so help me understand this. So we had, for example, in February, we had 20 accounts closed. And what is this at the bottom? I mean, how, like, if I wanted to know why those accounts closed, what do I look at?
So right now, it has it for the quarter as opposed, so you're missing some of the monthly data in that last table. So if you could just add a column that would specify the current month.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's a lot of accounts. And we still do the exit. Do we still do an exit interview or just or an enrollment survey?
We do a closure survey as well. Yeah. So what we find is there are kind of two different reasons. Well, two of the largest majority of closures occur. One for people who will like take a full distribution, for instance. or they request. And made up about 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 for the quarter. But then another large chunk is just the inactive accounts. Those are ones that become auto closed because we still haven't received their legal documents. So for instance, for the 11, we would have sent them an account closure survey. Absolutely.
Okay. Fran, any other questions on this slide?
No.
Okay. And enrollments, it looks like, a lot of people, and this isn't, we see the same thing on 529, and we do that, the enrollment survey. A lot of people don't specify where they're hearing about the plan. They don't comment. And we're seeing a little bit of that here as well. But it is interesting, if you go back to last year, family and friends and organizations, which means that's the hard work you guys are putting in within the state is really paying off. Anything that stands out here? Any questions on this slide?
I have a question. If it's not specified, can we just remove that block?
We can. We certainly can. If it may give you, if you want an overall look at, so the data won't align with the number of enrollees, but that's okay.
Well, and not specified in other are kind of negatives. But it's,
So you do want not specified to be removed from the graph, correct?
Sure. I think so. It would make it more clear for us to read.
Okay, fair enough. And I guess that's it. I'll stop sharing.
All right, do we have any questions for Dave or the team at Ascensus? All right, thank you all for continuing to hone that report, and as the data geeks always enjoy, the more the better. So with that, we're going to open up the discussion. We've kind of talked about this in large scale, 100,000 foot view concepts. Now we have something a little bit more concrete for you all to look at. And that really comes around the discussion on the IRS changes around hierarchy and what we would like to do specifically for the Arkansas plan. So what I'm going to do is we'll keep this as an open discussion, but I'm going to turn it over to Fran and Dave really to kind of kick us off here and lead where we're at currently. Fran?
So here, kind of the primer here, and if any of my explanation is not correct, Dave and Molly, you all correct me. But as I understand it, in 2020, the IRS issued final regulations that, among other things, impact the hierarchy of people other than the individual himself or herself, the individual who may open an account for that impaired person. So as the word suggests, it's truly a hierarchy or a pecking order of people. So if I'm the disabled, if I'm the one that an account wants to be open for, there is, and if you look in your packets, this is the list, so that if like a power of attorney, and if it's yes or no, if no, there's no power of attorney, then you go to the next line. It's the conservator. Well, there's no conservator. Is there a guardian? Well, yes. So it's literally one by one identifying who outside of the individual himself or herself is authorized to open and manage the ABLE account. So at issue is this: when the IRS regulations were updated, the IRS gave the authority or the permission to each ABLE plan to determine if they would require proof of identification from whomever is being identified from this hierarchical grid to be the authorized individual overseeing the account. Now, stepping back even further from that, Arkansas is one of 19 states that belongs to an alliance called the National Able Alliance. So we meet very regularly with our counterparts at these other states, and it's a bipartisan group. But we share program management responsibilities with the census. So the alliance, we meet monthly, and then we also have monthly meetings with members of the census. So what is at issue here is the Able Alliance is asking each state to weigh in on whether they would require documentation or paperwork when an account is being opened by somebody other than the individual himself or herself. So in order to kind of make a decision about where we fall, we wanted you all to see currently, do we ask for documentation? And then if yes, what type of documentation? And then what are we considering for the future? And just a little bit of background, if you go down to the bottom where it says signature, this is pulled out of our program description. And this is the area where the person who is signing is in essence saying, you know, I understand that if I'm falsifying anything, then, you know, I'm committing perjury. So many of us in the alliance feel like, or other states too, feel like some people are turned off from opening up an Able account because of, yet again, another endless stream of paperwork. And, you know, does that deter enrollment? And like, for example, I don't know exactly how I would prove that I'm a sibling of somebody. I mean, I could show family pictures, but I mean, there's no official documentation to show that. So if I had an impaired brother, I may not be able to open, and I'm his executor, I may not be able to open an account for him if I can't prove that I'm his sibling, but I guess I would have, you know, the conservator or the guardian paperwork. There are two things. So the proof, we need to let the alliance know where Arkansas would like to fall on this issue. Would we require paperwork for everybody or would we not? And then additionally, we need to let a census know because in June, our website will be updated with the new requirements. And like I said, you know, the IRS kind of gave it to each state to take care of. And I will say majority of the states in the alliance are leaning toward not requiring the paperwork. So that's what I wanted to put before you all today is, and Dave, Molly, if you all want to add anything.
I mean, my only question, Fran, is there any state statute language that gives any guidance here?
I think typically we just follow what federal.
What the
right?
line, yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, there would not be anything state specific to
To
this,
the hierarchy.
to the hierarchy within our legislation. We have reviewed that and there is not any.
Fair enough. So
So with that,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
Grant.
Dave, go ahead.
Go ahead, Grant, please.
No, I was just gonna see, Joe, Chrissy, do you have any questions? Comments?
This is Joe. No questions, but anything that limits barriers, I'm okay with. Less paperwork.
I don't have any questions, but I agree with Joe on this. Working for DHS and even being a caseworker years ago, I know sometimes that having to provide that added documentation can be a barrier. So I'm in agreement on this.
Okay. Dave?
Yeah, my only thought is, it sounds like a lot, as Fran has already said, a lot of members of the Alliance are moving forward with the least obstacles possible, meaning no paperwork. So I don't know, Molly, if we have any particular feedback from our legal team here, but I suppose we're all kind of relying on the state to make their decisions, each state to make their own decisions.
Yeah, that's right. I think at this point in time, only 2 Alliance members are opting for, or 3, I'm sorry, are opting for any sort of paperwork requirements. The rest of those 19 are all at this point defaulting to not requiring paperwork, and that's the indications that we have now. And we are the document, or the verbiage that Fran had here at the signature box. We are kind of going to be expanding upon that a little bit, just to clarify, like what they would be certifying to, and to make the state feel more comfortable with that penalty of perjury language. So there are drafts, and we're currently working on that with other members. So a lot of states are really, really comfortable with this new approach, and they also don't want to continue to have those barriers for new enrollments for their programs.
Thank you.
So do we need to do any kind of that?
Yep, so I would ask if there is a motion to approve the hierarchy structure and reporting or lack of reporting documentation as presented.
I make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
It's Joe, I second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, with that, thank you all very much. And I do appreciate you all having that discussion and doing that. This will keep us on track to meet that June transition deadline. So I appreciate that.
So that goes back to what, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but what Molly was saying, she kind of alluded to watching these numbers once this is in place or the barrier is removed, and give it some time, because that will be, some of the messaging for us too,
Yes.
to help people understand this. So it'll just be next year at this time. I'll be interested to see if we have any changes that perhaps we can attribute to this that we've decided today.
That's great.
Hey, if Fran, this is Joe, I'd also be interested to see the difference between the states that opted to have documentation and the ones that didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. Yeah, and it's 3 states, right, Molly, that are going to continue asking for documentation?
Yeah, 2 are going to be asking for documentation for all of the hierarchy members. 1 is only going to be requiring for POA, and they're just going to be requiring POA forms.
Are any of those in the 7 that are going live at the end of this month, or are they all June or even November releases?
The POA
that's an
requirement.
unfair question to ask.
The one who was going to be requiring the POA form for the POA hierarchy member is going live for January. So we will have some initial indications of, how this is perceived with the other programs. The other programs that will be kind of going with all documentation requirements, that won't occur until November. So it won't be until next year that we have some initial kind of feedback.
Very good. And Fran, you had a question on the survey, I believe you mentioned in your email. Do I have that correct?
I had a question on the survey.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was a follow-up question that you had in your email that I don't have your email in front of me. Molly, I don't know if you remembered or not, but I thought it was something about the survey, but I could be completely off base.
Oh, I think it was something Grant mentioned at the last meeting. It was getting some clarification, and I think it was on that exit or closure survey.
Okay.
And maybe even seeing a copy of it.
Yeah, that's right. And we actually have that. I think, Molly, you had sent me a note saying it was available in Documentum, I think. Is that where it is? Or
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
can share that with you.
Yeah. Oh, Chris, you can access it that way? Okay. All right.
Yeah, that, Chris, the folder for that's called survey results, and it breaks up the account opening and then account closure. So you'll see both of them in there.
Great. All right, is there any other new business?
Next meeting.
All right, so I think Fran has a couple options for Joe and Christy just to consider for our next meeting. So
We were looking at perhaps Tuesday, June 21st, or Thursday, June 23rd. Didn't know if either one of those you knew for a fact would work better than the other.
And give me those one more time, please.
June 21 or June 23.
23 is better for me, but I can do either one. It just depends. In the morning at 1, I can do on the 21st. On the 23rd, I'm wide open.
Thank you. Christy, do you have any preference?
No, I checked my calendar and so far those dates both are clear.
Okay. Thank you.
all right, thank you all. With that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. I got a second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, see y'all next time.
Thanks, Grant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.